So in addition to thinking about, strategically about what you want to be talking about, right? It's really important when we talk about who we want to be talking to, right? Who is our likely base? We should have conscious discussions and strategy surrounding who we want to be talking to. Ask questions like, what do I care about? And how does that impact my community, right? People do a lot better work if they're organizing around something that they care about, that they're passionate about, as opposed to just doing what everyone else is doing, right? So what do we care about? What are we passionate about? And then think about, how does that impact my community? Who in my community does that most impact, right? And how do we organize for change? Who are we in terms of what community does our core group represent? As I said earlier, it's important. We don't want to be on a white horse, right? Working class communities have seen more than enough politicians on white horses come in promising to save them and then abandoning them, right? Start it where you are and grow outwards. Strategize on how to become more inclusive. People often ask, where should I start? And we'll talk about relational organizing or deep canvassing later when we actually get to starting. But, people will often ask, where should I start? And my answer is always your neighbor. And then the neighbor on the other side of them. And then the neighbor on the other side of them. Right? You start out from where you live and you start making concentric circles, right? You start talking to people directly around you, the people that you interact with, the people who face the same struggles that you do, the people that have the same environmental effects because they live right next to you that you do, right? If I wanted to start organizing about getting rid of the train that's behind my house, which is supposed to happen, we're 10 years in and there's probably another 10 years before the train's gone. But you start organizing with the other people who are pissed off about the train, right? They're pissed off that it's going through, at midnight, honking its horn constantly, and, that are pissed off that people are dying on the tracks, and things like that. So you start with who's immediate to you when you're doing that work. Who do we want to be represented in the organization, right? Oftentimes political groups act more as advocates for other people than voices for their own members, right? And we don't want to fall into that. We don't want to fall into savior complex stuff like that. If your membership is lacking in the people that you want to advocate for, how can you build relationships and expand your reach outside the people in the room, right? Greens often have a problem with the first people in the room. The people that founded the party have camped in positions and often, and not always, right? There's some amazing party founders. I work with Howie on almost a daily basis, and he's been organizing for 35 plus years for this party and doing the work, right? But other places, they've been sitting and they've been occupying space, and they've often been blocking evolution and change and organizing, right? So in that situation, the solution is organize around them, right? Bring more people into the room. And one thing that I think we really need to think about is, as socialist organizers, who has material interest in change, right? Someone who has a material interest in seeing a change is going to fight tooth and nail for it, right? Someone for whom it's an academic or ideological point can easily reach a point where they walk away because the challenges or the risks are too much, right? It's a good example is healthcare, right? An uninsured person is going to fight tooth and nail. They're going to throw down for universal healthcare, right? Because it means they get fucking health coverage, right? It means that they actually get to see a doctor potentially, right? But if you just think it's a good idea, the major unions are a perfect example of this, right? Many of them oppose universal healthcare because of the sweet healthcare deals they've gotten in their negotiations for their people, right? When push comes to shove, they don't support universal healthcare because they think it might hurt their members. So they back out and they don't support, right? As opposed to that uninsured person working, in the food service. This is ride or die for them, right? They got to do it. They got to have this change, or they're going to continue to suffer from lack of health care. They're going to die younger, because that's what we do when we don't have health care, right? So as socialists, I'm a much more of a Marxist leaning, anarchist and socialist, but we have to focus in on who has an interest in material change, right? Another big debate in the Green Party is dues. And what I've found personally is that the working class people who have material interest in change will make dues happen, right? They'll find a way to scrounge the $12 to pay the minimum low income dues that we have in Illinois, right? They'll find a way to scrape out the $10 a month to pay normal dues, because they believe in the mission, they believe in the change we want. Who fights dues, in my experience, usually is the middle class, right? The people who can afford it, but they often advocate for those who can't, while those who can't are making it work, right? That material interest is so key to actually having the follow through, to overcome challenges, right? Because if you don't have that material interest, there's a line that you won't cross, right? And we've got to deal with that. So yeah, I have said it multiple times. We don't need people on a white horse. What we should be striving for is to build bottom-up democratic organizations that are made up of the community, not speaking for them, right? Of, not for, I think is a very important, model when you're qualifying the lead, and who should you be talking to.
Yeah, actually, on that point, which I think kind of advances us to our next slide anyway, when we're talking about this idea of made up of the community and not for them, what we're really talking about is teaching others to be their own organizers and to go on and to keep building the organization that they want to see. So I think those of us that are starting local parties, starting these organizations, we have to have an organizer mindset, which one way to define that is we should really be looking to put ourselves out of a job, so to speak. We're not there to speak for people. We're there to help empower them. We're there to help share the tools and the infrastructure and knowledge we've gained over time, so that they can actually create the democratic processes that they want, that serve their community, and that make the decisions and all that they need for their community, because every community is different. It's the people who live there in that community who know what they need. That's what Chris is talking about, right? You ask a working class person what the working class needs. So that's an important mindset here, I think, to have, that we're not going in there to save people. We're trying to build a movement here that's going to work for everyone, and the way that it works for everyone is by empowering each of those communities to act on their own, to make their own decisions, to have self-determination, yet all of us linked together in solidarity.
Yeah, and when Garrett was talking earlier, about the subdivisions of the larger geographic area in Allegheny County, right? You've got the county, and then you've got all of the small towns within the non-Pittsburgh areas of the county, and then you've got Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh is divided into its own neighborhoods, right? An important thing about this, empowerment is that what environmental crisis looks like, what, a lack of public works investment looks like, what a lack of affordable housing looks like, what a lack of access to healthcare looks different and manifests slightly differently in each of these neighborhoods, right? So when when I march across town and go into another neighborhood demanding the changes that I need in my neighborhood, I very well could not be representing even the problems that they have, right? And when you do that, you've shown yourself to be very out of touch and very untrustworthy, right? Which, going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, trusting relationships are the key, right, to doing this work. So it's really important that we, we're the of, not for, and that we're empowering people, not speaking on behalf of them.
If I could throw in a quick example, you were talking about the geographic distinctions. I live in a suburb just outside of Pittsburgh, so I don't live in the city itself. So it's very interesting to see the different kinds of conversations that happen when you get the different constituencies, the different neighborhoods together to talk. Because the talk for people that live in Pittsburgh is very different from the people that live in my suburb versus other suburbs. So what happens in Pittsburgh, for example, is things like public transit are very important there, because we're talking about big apartment buildings, lots of cars because it's the dense, busy part of the city. So, it makes much more sense to bike, to walk, to ride public transit. But the public transit is not very reliable outside the city. So when they talk public transit, if they were to come to my town and say, all this stuff about public transit, the people here would say, well, that sounds great, but like, we don't actually have any bus lanes here. We don't have any trains here. So if we did those things, we would need much more investment for those things, because our town is not prepared for that sort of thing. But my suburb is actually walkable. We have a small walkable downtown where people can go to, a little grocery store and things like that. But there's lots of towns around me that they don't have anything like that. There's, there's some little small highway that goes off into the forest, right? And you just see houses along the way, and it's not walkable. So, for example, when you're planning campaigns, the people in Pittsburgh, they'll say, let's go door to door and let's go talk to everybody. You could do that in some communities, but maybe not others, because you can't even literally walk without putting your personal safety at risk because you're walking down the highway, So these are all important questions, I think, in terms of organizing, that you have to have the right people in the room for what your organizing goals are. And again, whether it's by turf or issue or whatever it is, get the right people in the room. And if you don't have the right people, then try to recruit more of the right people instead of trying to speak for them.